Welcome to the Institute of Managers and Leaders Australia and New Zealand, to our second virtual development day for 2020. Thank you very much for joining our second session today. And I'll shortly introduce our facilitator Ty for today's session, our second session, as I said, on adaptability and resilience during uncertainty and change. I will make a comment at the outset. Many of you may have registered for resilience in isolation, which was Ty's original topic. Now, that was done some time ago when we were all in lockdown, and the feeling was, you know, how do we maintain resilience through the lockdowns and through isolation? And obviously, there's been most states across Australia and indeed New Zealand have now opened up and in some ways loosened those lockdown measures, and I note that they are loosening in Victoria. So we have made a late change in the last couple of weeks just to adapt the title, but certainly the content will be very, very similar. And as Ty will explain, dealing with change is actually a huge part of the isolation factor. Our lifestyles are changing as the isolation and the lockdowns are easing. So there is that late change, but it will not impact on the content at all that Ty will discuss. So let me introduce you again to the Institute. We are, for 80 years, we have created better managers and leaders for a better society. We provide learning and development opportunities for management and leadership professionals through our leadership programs, Essentials, Foundations, and Accelerate. And we also run fortnightly webinars, fortnightly masterclasses, and provide a whole range of learning resources for our members and non-members to be a part of and to improve their own lives and their careers as managers and leaders. Indeed, today's session, the Development Day, is a huge day for the Institute. We've got over 1,000 registrations for today, and we're really excited to bring you 4 of Australia's and New Zealand's leading facilitators. We started with Nikki this morning with a terrific session, and the feedback's been phenomenal. And I've no doubt that the feedback, once again, coming through after Ty's session this morning will be just as fantastic. Now more than ever, it's essential for us to focus on the well-being of ourselves and the well-being of others. And certainly during these challenging times, these sorts of connections that we have through the Institute and through our learning and development and our relationship with terrific facilitators and content providers such as Ty certainly bring that to the fore. So let me introduce this second session, as I said, adaptability and resilience during uncertainty and change. If there is one thing that most people relate to right now, it is uncertainty. Our ability to be resilient is being tested as we navigate the current environment. In this session with Ty today, we'll explore how our resilience and adaptability is challenged during periods of change and uncertainty. The session will provide you with a basic understanding of mental health awareness, focusing on how our brain perceives and reacts to stress and uncertainty. We'll explore the change curve and how we can build resilience and apply a flexible mindset in order to minimize the shock caused by constant change in our environment. In this session, there are 3 key areas: the key concepts of the mental health continuum and how resilience is impacted during periods of change, how the brain processes and reacts to stress, change, and uncertainty, and some practical tools that you can take away and use to build a resilience action plan yourself by reframing negative thoughts and applying a flexible mindset. I will remind all our viewers today, our participants today, that there is the action plan that we sent to you. If you don't have that action plan, please email us at info@managersandleaders.com.au and we will send you that. That is a document that will allow you to take away the learning from today's session, what you'll start, stop, and continue, as well as some of the 3 key learning aspects that you've taken away from this second session of our Development Day. Without further ado, I'll introduce Ty Vincent-Spovero. Ty is a facilitator, coach, and wellness expert. Ty has worked in the medical, psychological, and fitness industry for over 20 years, and he has delivered multiple programs for corporate clients on a broad range of topics, including flexible mindset and resilience in isolation, and navigating change when working remotely. Ty specialises in executive and life coaching and delivering workshops in mental health and well-being. Ty is also a wonderful facilitator with IML, works closely with IML throughout the work that we do with our workshops, with our masterclasses, and with our webinars. And Ty, Vincent Spaviro, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Sam, for that introduction. I've been having some computer troubles today. It's been crazy, so I'm glad that we're here. First and foremost, thank you, Nikki, ahead of time. A fantastic session and a great, tough act to follow, but I'm really looking forward to it. As you can tell from my accent, born and raised here in Australia. Just kidding. I'm actually from the States. I was born and raised in New York and made my way here via Los Angeles. What we're looking at right now is that adaptability and resilience during uncertainty and change. Where I first developed an interest in psychology and psychiatric work was when I was back in the States. Quick little background, I'm a PA in the States, meaning I'm a physician's assistant. That means that I have all the rights of a medical doctor within reason, diagnosing, prescribing, history taking, treating, except I don't have full autonomy. I actually started in emergency medicine trauma. One of the most significant things in my medical career was that I worked triage for 9/11. I'd gotten off my 14-hour shift and came out, heard a plane, and then looked up and saw a plane. Growing up in the city, I knew that was not supposed to happen, and then I watched the plane hit. My attending at the time ran out and said, "Get your back in here." And 36 hours later, on top of my other 14-hour shift, I was pretty wrecked. I was required to go through PTSD therapy for about 6 months. And it was right then and there that my resilience was tested and change mattered. During these uncertain times, we're in lockdown, we're out of lockdown, COVID, all of these things, all these plans we had for the big 2020 have all changed. And I think it's really important that we understand what that change looks like. What is going on up here when one thing after another happens? So I'm super excited to be able to present these to you, for you to be able to understand what exactly is going on. And with that said, I want to get started right into it, right? So the big thing is this. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It's the one that is most adaptable. Charles Darwin, you guys. And that's what it is. This is not about, I have to be the strongest. I have to be the most resilient in the world. I have to be the most intelligent. It's about how you can adapt within who you are. And that's what's really important. I want to go over what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about the mental health continuum, resilience and liminal thinking. That liminal thinking, adding on to what Nikki was talking about, those values, those beliefs, the brain and change and the change curve. What's going on in our heads during change? Understanding control, because at the end of the day, we can only control who? Ourselves. So we want to keep that. And then strategies to better adapt resilience. It's really being able to focus, okay, what can I take piece by piece? First and foremost, we got to talk about the mental health continuum. Some of you may have heard this before, some not, but it's where our head is at, where our mood, where our mental health is. And for the most part, what do we hope? We hope that we're in that healthy, normal functioning, normal repetition of things, normal sleep patterns, physically well and energetic and socially active. Most of the time, we'd like to be here. Unfortunately, that's been challenged a number of times. And a lot of the time, we're staying in that reacting. And where we're at that reacting is common and reversible stress, nervous or irritable, right? I know I've been there. Trouble sleeping, you're looking at tired and lower energy, decreased social activity. Now, one can argue, we've been in isolation. Of course, we're going to have decreased social activity. But even cutting off from your family, not engaging with people, being from the States, I have to FaceTime and Zoom and do all those things a lot with my family to stay connected. But during times of this reacting, we get a little irritable. These are the times that we have a bad day, but I ask you, was it a bad day or just a bad 10 minutes that you turned into a whole entire day? That no one was there to see this happen, so for sure, you were going to let everybody know that it was a bad day. When we stay in that reacting too long, we end up in that injured. Now, this is significant functional impairment, anxiety, anger, depression. We feel fatigued. We want to social avoid people. Now, we've all been in this injured area. a lot of the times we've been in here more times than we want to. And that's okay, because again, it's a continuum. This is where it happens. However, when we stay there a bit too long, we get into that ill. And ill is that clinical disorder, right? Extreme anxiety, depressed mood, unable to perform your task, isolation. And there's that key, wanting nothing to do with anyone. When isolation is forced, we resist to an extent, but we can also bring it on ourselves. And that in lies the problem. We can go back and forth, but if we spend too much time in this ill category, we have to seek help. Why? Because we're not getting out of our own way, and we are the first to get in our own way. So what this is showing us is just that back and forth. It's a continuum. We've all been here, and we will continue all the way through this pandemic and after, whatever the new normal is, because nothing's going to be the same. We will still have this continuum of going back and forth. So it's really good to know where you fall on this, so you can be aware of it, because information is key. Now, when we're talking about that mental health, we have to obviously talk about resilience. And there's a lot of different things that come to mind with resilience. First and foremost is that bounce back. Resilience is the term used to describe our ability to bounce back. It's not how many times you get up. I'm sorry, not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get up. You know, hang in there, you'll get through this. And that's true. That bounce back is a crucial part of resilience. However, my best thing, or the thing that I like the most, is talking about that second, that recharge or adapt. Resilience isn't about how you recharge. It is about how you recharge and adapt, not how you endure. A lot of people think that enduring is what resilience is. Oh, I have to get through this. I have to get through this. Absolutely. But you have to be able to adapt, to look at something and say, okay, my reaction to this wasn't exactly what I wanted. What can I do different the next time? We have to think about that old saying, you know, repeating something constantly, expecting a different result. That's the definition of insanity. And unfortunately, a lot of us do this. I'm guilty of it. My partner's guilty of it. Numerous people that I know are. A lot of you out there are. And then what we are able to do is then change. Developing a state of mental and physical resilience can be achieved with practical strategies you currently have, and others can be learned. That's the thing, is when we're going through change and when our resilience is truly being tested, all those strong points that we used to grasp onto go out the window. We don't know at times what to do. So it's really about understanding, okay, here are my strengths. This is what I can latch onto. Because that resilience goes into how we perform accordingly. And let's take a look at that. Now, when we're looking at these type of things, we want to look at that resilience performance matrix. So we have that comfortable, thriving, distress, and burnout. Ideally, perfect world, we're in that thriving. We have high resilience and high performance. It's the best combination for resilience, well-being, and performance. You're feeling good, you're feeling supported, you're understanding, you have the resources for the tasks at hand. However, a lot of the time we stay in that comfortable. Not the best of performance, but we have a higher resilience. You're happy and content, but comfortable, not invested in, is really a challenging time, because it challenges our goals and we just kind of sit there. We get comfortable in what we know. Why? Because it's a survival mechanism. Comfort provides us survival. We avoid change, we avoid things that we're not used to. Why? Because it makes us uncomfortable. And really about change and this resilience is learning to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I know that can sound really crazy at times, but that's really what we're looking at. Because if we don't start to move towards that thriving, we end up in a burnout. So working hard and performing well, but burning out stress, that's due to stress. Why? Because we don't have the resources, because we haven't adapted, we haven't gravitated towards new things that can cause change for the better. And inevitably we have that distress. It's the combination of that low performance and the low resilience. This is the time when you really need to look at that resilience development, to look at what change can happen within yourself. Resilience really comes down to something of our liminal thinking. And I want to touch on that. Liminal thinking David Gray does a lot of great work around this, and I love the saying, perception is projection. Whatever we perceive, that's what we'll project into the world. That's a really great point because it's different views, it's different cultures, it's different genders, it's how we identify. And the big thing with liminal thinking is this: as we all perceive reality different, it shapes our own reality. Little story for you. You may have heard this. The king brings 4 blind men into his chambers, and he has an elephant there. He puts one to touch the side of the elephant, one to touch the tail, one to touch the trunk, and one to touch the ear. All of them said something different. The man touching the body said, "Oh, it's the wall." The man grabbing the tail said it's a rope. The man touching the trunk says it's a snake. And the man touching the ear said it's a fan. Now, none of them are right, obviously, because it was an elephant. However, their perception is what they projected. And that's what we're really looking at on this model. At the very bottom there, you see that's reality. That is what is presented to us. In between is that liminal space that encompasses our experiences, the attention, theories, judgments, beliefs, those values that Nikki spoke on in her session. When we have all those, then the obvious at top, that's our reality. That's how we perceive things. So everyone's perception is different, and it creates this loop of what am I seeing? Now, if we don't learn to adapt and really gravitate towards change, then we're stuck in this cycle, in this loop, or that times I refer to it as the doom loop, because you keep repeating the same things over and over and over again. Now, your reality doesn't necessarily always match up to someone else's, as I stated earlier. But the fact of the matter is this, is that you can change your perceptions. It doesn't mean you have to innately go against what you believe in, but you get to integrate those things in. Your perception can change slightly. Getting the most information you can is really key. So when you're thinking about, okay, what should I be doing? Is this reality? Don't be hard on yourself. It is your reality. However, what you get to do is decide, okay, how can I change that? And for the best. When we're looking at change, though, this is where it really gets tricky, right? The brain in change. Now, what we're looking at in general is we are hardwired to avoid threats. Why? We've all heard of that fight or flight. It's about survival. We want to survive. And when we see change, it poses a threat. It can trigger something in our past, a trauma. So even though we are predispositioned to respond to change, resistance to change is strong. Why? Because we look at something, wait, I have to change something, I have to do something again, right? Look at all the things that we're going through. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, Victoria, especially Melbourne, you're in isolation, out of isolation, in lockdown, this, all these type of things as a country as well. So when we have to constantly do this now, and this is the restriction and this, we get that change fatigue, and change fatigue is real. It gets exhausting. Why? Because your brain's like, now we got to deal with this. However, neurons that fire together wire together. So all those innate things that you already have, they're already ingrained. But when you open yourself up to change, when you really look at it and be like, okay, what is bothering me here with this? That's when things can happen. And we start to habit shift. And you have to. Habit shifting is required. Now, everyone asks the age-old question, how long does it take to change a habit? There's a lot of theories and there's a lot of studies out there, and I do not discredit them. They are fully investigated. But I do challenge the long-term changing of habits. If your habit benefits you, you will immediately change it. I always use this example when I get to do things in person, but think about when you had a commute. Maybe you did have a commute before everyone went into lockdown. If I told you I could get you home 15 minutes faster after work, and that means you get to leave 15 minutes later in the morning, with this new route that I showed you, how long would it take you to learn that route? I would challenge, and a lot of times when I would have participants in there, they say, not long. I don't have to do it once and then realize I get that. And that's what change is about. You have to decide how this benefits you, what that looks like, because you can change it. Now, ingraining it and instilling it requires that repetition. You don't always have to turn on the GPS on your phone, right? You just know it by heart after a while. And that's what habits are, is that repetition. Again, neurons that fire together, wire together. But when we look at change, there's different levels to it. And that's why we got to look at that change curve. Some of you may have seen this before, the Kluger-Ross change curve. Now, those of you who are looking at this may look, this kind of looks like what they talk about when death occurs, the stages of grief. And honestly, at times, we regard change as grief. Why? Initially it happens. We have that shock and denial. We have to go into lockdown. We are in quarantine, right? I'm using that as an example. A change at work, a change in position. And then what happens? We get frustrated. We're like, oh, why am I doing this? Why are we having to deal with this? This isn't fair. This isn't right. And then we get down into that depression or apathy. We have that low mood, lacking in energy. It's like, here we go again. What am I going to do? I don't have a job anymore. I have to teach my kids from home. I have a 16-year-old. Oh, sorry, 17. He's just turned 17. He's a grown adult now. And it's like, now I got to add this to my plate. But then we start to come back up. We start to experiment. We start to look at this. Okay, maybe I can incorporate this in. We make a decision about how we're going to do it. You get to learn how to work in a new way, how to think in a new way. And then finally, at the end, it's that integration. Those neurons have fired and now they're wiring together. Now, here's the problem, is you may be partly way through this curve on one thing, right? Say you're at the experiment phase, and then all of a sudden, boom, something else happens, a new change. And so with this new topic, you're back in that shock and denial. Yet over on this other one, you're like, I'm just trying to integrate this one in. But it's being aware. It's about compartmentalizing. It's about taking it, a story is called bird by bird, piece by piece. Because what happens is we start to get overwhelmed. When we get overwhelmed during change because multiple things are happening and we're not aware where we are on this curve or acknowledging that we're struggling with these type of things, then that becomes the problem when we shut down. Our brain goes back into that survival mode because that's all it wants to do is survive. And then we start to look at things. We start to gravitate towards whose fault it is. Is it mine? Is it theirs? Is it the world's in general? And that's when we start to look at that control. That control at first is external or internal. So that locus of control, that external locus, we all have been here. We all know people who are like this. Blame outside forces for their circumstances. Often credit luck or chances for any successes. Frequently feel hopeless and powerless in the face of difficult situations. I know I've been there, and I would definitely say that a lot of you have been. And then don't believe that they can change their situation through their own efforts. Isn't that something when we look at external locus of control? We give our power away. We give our thought process, our abilities. We don't champion ourselves because it's out of our control. Absolutely. Government regulations that change things, organizations stepping down people, any of these type of things, whatever it may be, that is out of our control. But that doesn't mean that we don't have our own duty to ourselves and those around us. And that's where we have to look at that internal locus. You are in control of your successes and failures. Positive attitudes. Now, I want to stop there and say, positive attitude isn't just like, come on, just be happy. Forget that. That's not what we're talking about here. It's about making sure that everything that comes at you isn't a disaster. It's about, okay, what can I do? How is this going to make me a better person? At times, that's the struggle. But keeping positive, finding one good thing that can come out of this, even the smallest, will help us keep that positive attitude. Accepting responsibilities for your actions, achievements, and your failures. No one ever says, yay, I like being a failure. Never happens, right? But the fact of the matter is, is that we have to own up. We have to know what our 50% is to the situation, because we always have a stake in what is going on. And then lastly, understanding that your success and failures comes from your own effort. You are the only person that can control you, despite what a lot of people think. You get to decide what things look like. You get to live, to Nikki's point, she had said before, that intentional life. So really looking at these locus of control when a change is presented to you and a change to your resilience and asking you to step up again is really key. Because there are three things that happen when we look at control. And that's what's in our control, what we can influence, and then not in our control. Control, what can I choose to do about it? Feel, say, think, or do. Taking that moment to be like, okay, how am I going to react to this? I use this as an example. I almost killed someone. I'm not bragging about that. Bear with me, okay? I just come out of clinicals of PA school, and I was all excited. I loved emergency medicine, and that's what I wanted to do. That's what I have to do. And the first patient was a cardiac patient. And a medication I was about to administer, I was about to administer the wrong dose. Unfortunately, this happens a lot. Not saying that's excusable by any means. Luckily, my attending caught it before it happened. I adjusted the dose and he pulled me aside and said, Ty, I love your enthusiasm and you're going to do wonders for medicine. However, you have a very small window in what we do. That's a matter of life or death. And taking those few seconds, those few moments, in some cases, few minutes, just a couple, you will save someone's life or you will end their life. That's the same thing what's going on now. If we just react, we don't take that minute to be like, okay, what can I control? I control my thought process. I control how I look at things, how I feel about them, what I say. Those are really the key, and that's where we want to stay. However, we get to influence things. What can I influence? Is there something within your life that is challenging you right now that, you know what, you don't have complete control over, but you can put your 2 cents in, maybe 2 cents, 5 cents, 10 cents, whatever that may be, right? Because you get to then join into the conversation. And at the end of the day, we all just want to be heard. No matter if you're an introvert, extrovert, any of those type of things. We want to be able to understand what is going on. Unfortunately, we spend a lot of time that not in control. That's the harsh reality that, what am I going to do? We've seen that time and time again with 2020. Things are just out of our control. And we want to limit your attention and the aspects of the problems here. Because when we get caught in that narrative constantly, our brain stays in survival mode. Remember, that is the key. Your brain wants you to survive. That's the reason why hypothermia, I use that as an example. Some of you may know. When hypothermia occurs, excessive cold, the brain starts to remove blood from our limbs and other areas. Why? To move it in, to keep our vital organs, our brain safe. It doesn't care that you want hands and that you want feet. You'll adjust accordingly. It's in a survival mode. And unfortunately, this is where we stay a lot of the time. So adapting and understanding, okay, taking those few moments that I talked about, what can I do differently? What does this look like for me is really key. And that's all well and fine, but how do we do it? Right? We have to have those strategies about what's going on. So let's talk about it. Strategies for adapting. Information, be informed so your emotional brain can calm down and regroup. Quick little side note. Every time you have a reaction to something or something comes into the eyeballs, the ears, the nose, the mouth, it turns into an electrical signal, right? And it has to go whoop, right up through here. However, unfortunately, the first place that stops off at is the emotional brain. You have a reaction, you have a response, that fight or flight, and that wall goes up with that logical brain. And even though logical brain's knocking on there being like, hey, I can help, let's give you some serotonin, some dopamine, let's talk through this. Emotional brain's like, nope, shut it down, got it, not doing it. So being informed and labeling things and understanding what's coming in automatically engages that logical brain. So that wall might come up a little bit, but right away we've cut it off. Looking to connect with people Ask for help, for another point of view. We have to stay connected during these times. And it's so easy for us a lot of the times to shut down. It's easy for us to shut down, take away all the events that have been happening. However, when we get to that connect, we get to look at that opportunity. What are the opportunities that this could present? What does that look like? Because that's the great thing about change. It can make us better, and it will make us better. We look at it through different lenses that we'll talk about. And then lastly, that mindset, shifting your perspective, pausing, choosing, relabel, and reframe. That's what it comes down to. And sometimes it's like, Ty, we know, we have to change our mindset again. But that's what this is about. It's constantly adapting. So when we're looking at information, facts are facts. Obtain information to increase support of certainty. Make sure that before you, in the States we say pop off, right? Before you decide to have a reaction to something, that you have enough information to really support that. Never make those decisions right off the bat. When we don't know something, we tend to how it's going to play out and how horrible it's going to be. It's a really good movie. It's like a 3-part trilogy, right? And most of the time, that doesn't happen. But then if we don't nip that in the bud ahead of time, we stay stuck in all of that. And getting as much information as possible will free up brain energy and focus so that you can make an adaptable decision. And that's key. Having all the facts that you know of can help you change, can make things adapt accordingly. When we look at that connection, connect with others, accept help. It's very hard at times for us to ask for help. A lot of the times that vulnerability and that help is regarded as weakness, especially if it's from someone who's a superior or from someone that looks up to you and you're like, how do I show this? I can't let them know I'm having a problem. Because when you ask for another person's perspective and support from others, you don't feel alone. And we innately are pack animals. We need that connection with people. Even the biggest loner of things is like, oh my God, you know, I want to be alone, I want to be left, and we all want those type of things. But the fact of the matter is this, is that we still need to connect with people. The worst thing that could happen back in the times is being ostracized from your village, from your community. Why? Because it meant certain death. Now, plenty of people survived and were able to prosper, but we want connection. And during uncertainty and change and adaptability, we have to connect with others. Because then we get to look at it for our opportunity. And there's 3 things we want to look at when we're talking about that opportunity in general. That reverse lens, we're just talking about that connect, right? How might other people be seeing this? Now, this isn't getting caught up in a narrative of, am I being judged? We all get to be judged. It doesn't mean that it's right, but it's going to happen. But reaching out to people that you respect, that you want their point of view on things, that's that reverse lens. If you can't get out of your own way, ask for that help. Because then we get to look into the next one, which is that long lens. How do we view the situation in 6 months' time? We've all been through difficult situations, and we look back 6 months, a year, whatever it may be. It was like, it wasn't my funnest moment, but I got through it. And things aren't so bad. Time heals all wounds. We do it. For the most part, yes. What time does for us is it gives us perspective on those type of things. So looking at that long lens, okay, will this situation, this change, what would it look like in 6 months? We look very different now than we did 6 months ago. So we all can see that the adaptability will happen. And then wide lens, how can I grow and learn from this situation? That's the key. It's that positive attitude we were talking about with that internal locus of control. What you have to be able to do is, can I grow from this situation? And when we look at it that way, more times than not, the answer is yes. Again, adapting and finding new ways to be able to do it, but you can. And how do we do that? We shift our mindset. So First and foremost, we pause, stop, take a moment, check in with your thoughts and feelings. That story that I told when I first started out in the ER, we have to give yourself those couple minutes. Even if you're in a conversation, you can excuse yourself. You can say, okay, I hear what's happening. I just want to process this. Because in those moments, that's really about listening to understand versus listening to reply. Because once we pause and we check in with ourselves, we can say, okay, can I react differently? Can I take on a new angle with this? And that's really what's important. And that's where change occurs. Because then from there, we get to relabel things. Is this a problem or an opportunity to learn? Is it within my control? My control again, told you it was coming back up. And what can I influence or change? And that's what it comes down to. It's what you get to relabel with things. Once we take those three into consideration, what happens is we get to reframe. This is an opportunity for me, you, to learn and to find the answer. During these uncertain times, and they're going to start to continue to smooth out at times, but then all of a sudden something else will be thrown at you. It's really important to think about that shifting perspective, because in the long run, adapting means survival, and not just in the sense of I'm going to stay in my little bubble, I'm going to stay in my own little thought process. That's not what we're looking at. What we want to know is that when we start to adjust to things or things are thrown at us, that we can adapt and that we're going to be all right. And sometimes it doesn't look that way. What if we pause? We choose a different experiment. That's what this is about. We look at that change curve. This is a really great time when you're looking at these things to experiment. Then it becomes something new, and then we're able to reframe our thought process. With that being said, I want to talk about time. And the reason I always put this at the end is because time is the only thing we don't get back. We can get back jobs, we can get back money, we can get back companionship, but we can't get back our time. So I implore you to please use your time wisely, to not be always in survival mode, because sometimes stepping out of that, you're going to find a whole new adventure. With that also being said, thank you for your time, for giving your time to me and spending listening to me yammer on. With that being said, we're gonna stop. I want to take some questions. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much for everything. So with that being said, let's talk about some questions. I'm ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Ty. Thank you, Ty. Can you see me? I'm here. Yep. Thank you very much for a great session. Terrific, really inspiring and insightful, and certainly really enjoyed it. I hope you're still there, Ty. Yeah, there you are. That's okay.
Yes,
that's
go ahead.
Okay. Ty, we've got a few questions coming through. Okay, so from William, what is your perspective on how to build self-awareness into your mindset and make it stick even through tough times?
Thank you, William. I love that question. It's about being aware of your actions. How you build self-awareness is really thinking about, we talked about that pausing, right? To be able to like, how do I react to a situation constantly? It's picking your triggers. We all know our triggers. Sometimes it's people, sometimes it's situations. It's about, okay, when this is presented to me, how did I used to react? That right there is self-awareness. You being aware that you may not react the way that, let's say, positively, or the way that, I don't want to say should come across, because that's it, but however people would accept that in, that's already your self-awareness. That's what you want to do. Every time a trigger comes for you, you want to be aware of it. Okay, how am I reacting to it? I can react better. So those are really things. Know that you already have that self-awareness in there.
Just actually, I might just off that, Becca's asked what happens when someone has no self-awareness. So I assume this is someone they may work with or whatever and can't accurately reflect, shift or adjust.
That's a really great question. Thank you, Beck. That's where patience and that listening to understand versus listening to reply. Sometimes I would say this, when a person gives you their point of view and they're just completely oblivious to that it's detrimental, not only to themselves, but those around, that's when you get to have a conversation. Like, I hear what you're saying, but I don't quite think you understand what, are aware of my point of view on these type of things. And you get to call, when I say call people out, it sounds like you're being disrespectful, but you get to make people aware of another point of view. Them choosing to take that on, that's on them. But you responding politely and calmly and being like, I don't necessarily agree with you, and explaining your point of view, and that this person has to be aware that we all have to live in this world together. I think that's an attribute that helps people. Now, you're going to have people who are going to be reacting, and there's nothing you can do about that because we're back to that control again. So really, it's about, on your part, I'm not saying it's your fault, Beck, is being aware of the situation for yourself, because that person you're not going to be able to control, but you get to express your point of view.
Thanks, Ty. Karen, there's a lot of questions coming through. Please keep them coming. There's great feedback on the presentation. There's some great feedback. Karen says, hi, Ty, thanks for an amazing presentation. Any advice on being able to let things go and not dwell too much?
Ooh, Karen, that's a tough one. And yes, there is. Does that serve you? It's that self-awareness, that control. What you're holding on to. What are the pros and cons? Most of what I would say, if it doesn't serve you, it's that you have to take a moment. A lot of the time people think you just have to let it go, just let it go. Eventually, and what I mean by that is you're allowed to have these feelings. The thing is, feelings are not fact. They are a fleeting moment. So I implore you, feel that way. Be like angry about something, but then you get to let it go, because in that time we pause and we say, hey, is this serving me? Once we allow our brain to have its fit, let's put it that way, we get to stomp up and down, grab our toys and go home and pout. Afterwards, we're like, oh, okay. So you're allowed to feel those things and you're allowed to grab onto it. But what I always suggest is, remember, feelings are not fact. They don't define who you are or the situation. So that's what I was trying to do, because I am very much guilty of holding on to things. Listen, I come from a Latin family and we hold on to everything just to bring up 10 months from now, right? And what you don't want to be able to do is have it lingering. So allow yourself to feel those type of things, but let it go, in the sense of, is this really serving me?
Thanks, Ty. Great advice. So Luke has asked, how do you instill adaptability and resilience in others around you to build a more flexible, responsive, and effective team?
That is a really great question, and I'm working on a project on that right now. It's about your own self-awareness. It's about also how you instill that influence. You as a leader of that team get to influence. So you taking control of what you know, your adaptability, you get to share your story. That's the thing, is a lot of leaders or managers, yes, there's that delineation of, I'm the leader and the manager, you're the team or the employee. Absolutely, there has to be hierarchy. However, on teams, knowing that that manager or leader is in it with you, that you as a manager or leader want your team and that person to succeed, that has to be expressed. And unfortunately, a lot of the times leaders don't. It's about having a team collaboration on projects, hearing people's input. Even maybe it's not the input that you need, but at the same point, people are being heard. And as I said during the presentation, that's what they want to. So what I say with my leaders and managers is, how can you influence? What can you say? Are you assigning tasks that you yourself would do or are able to do if something fell through, to be supportive? It's really about knowing that your team is supported, and that's what they'll really look for. So I definitely say, in that influence, tell your story, and that's really what's going to be important.
Thanks, Ty. Fantastic advice. Advice, please, on dealing with. Oh, okay. So here's a very relevant question, and actually I can relate to some of this. Advice, please, on dealing with self-awareness and personal control in a fast-paced Zoom world with 6 or 7 meetings each day virtually.
Absolutely. I hear you. Sam's point, I've been on back-to-back presentations, and you don't get to take, it's again about taking that time out. It's about, you get to control your schedule to a certain point. Don't put those things back to back. And that self-awareness, because what happens is everything starts to get muddled. And to your point of the question is, how do you get to delineate and take that time? And that's what you need, is you need to, okay, what just happened? Can I decompress? When you get off that one meeting, allow yourself that minute of, we've all heard this, that breathe, step back. What can you reflect on? You don't need, as a whole, 15, 20 minutes, right? And some are literally posted up. What you need to be able to do is, even if it's back to back, before you jump onto that next one, you tell the one meeting, hey, I got to go on to another meeting. Thanks for everything. And once you close that out, take a minute for yourself. Be like, okay, prepare yourself mentally to go back in. Be aware that you're stressed. Be aware of those type of things. And as I said, with those feelings and effect, but that's not defining you. Let it happen, let it process, acknowledge it. Because once you acknowledge something, your brain relaxes. Once you know that you're anxious about something, like, okay, it's anxiety, to an extent it does, at least you can label those type of things. So with that, take those couple minutes, pause, be able to be like, okay, feeling real rowdy right now, but I'm gonna be okay. This is just a fleeting moment. So that's what I like to do in between my sessions when there are a lot of back-to-back.
Yeah, great advice, and particularly when there's, in this virtual environment for a lot of work-related meetings. Okay, so James, any strategy? Yeah, on any strategies on how to reframe bad things that have happened, and you can react in a not ideal fashion. The longer you stay in that mode, the harder it is to change. So any strategies to deal with things that you need to relabel where you've been in the wrong mode for months?
That's a big question. And there's, there has to, a little bit, would need a little bit more context. So I'm gonna put a general spin on it. If you know what that is, if you know whatever this framework is as a trigger for you, I implore you to take it to the side. And what I mean by that is, if you have this reaction of what that mindset is, I want you to look at it. And it's that whole, I'm about to, does this serve me and how does it? Because you, from what I can tell from the question, you know that this is the mindset that you're in. So unfortunately, we describe those feelings again as fact, and it becomes that survival. So once you step out of it and realize, okay, how does this serve me? Because it comes back to, we really won't hold on to, once we acknowledge things, we won't hold on to things that don't serve us. Does this go against your beliefs, your values? That liminal thinking that I was talking about, your reality is defined by that. So you get to go back and look at it. And again, I apologize, I don't know the context of what the issue is, but I say take it to the side. If you know where that is, write those things down. How does it serve me? And if it doesn't, you say thank you, but I'm gonna let those things go. Being aware of it is the first step. And it sounds like that you are. So now I say, okay, what is that trigger? What is this thing that's always happening, and how are you responding to it?
Thanks, Ty, great advice. Okay, a bit of a personal question for you, Ty, from Rosie. What has Ty's biggest challenge been with COVID-19, and what are the non-negotiables of his self-care?
Oh, wow, I feel like I enjoy long walks on the beach, and no, I'm sorry. No, thank you, Rosie. That's really great. Honestly, the biggest thing for me, initially virtual, if you're talking from a business or work perspective, I've done webinars to get that, but I'm, you can always tell I'm a little hyper as it is, but in person, I love that energy of feeding those type of things off of a room, and switching on to being in office, this is where it is, has been a bit challenging. personally is not seeing my family, not knowing when I will see them again. What I mean by that in person. My mom was actually here in Australia. I've been here about a little over a year, right before we went into shutdown, or lockdown, I should say. And if she was here a week later, she would have been in Australia for quite some time. But with that being said, I would say definitely my family, not seeing my family in person and not knowing when, because leaving the country is not an option. I'm not going back there. And, so it's in my partner and my son are here. So those are the challenging things and I think a lot of people can relate to that, even within the country itself, not being able to go to certain states and doing those type of things. So those have been, that's really the biggest challenge for me. Non-negotiables for me, meditation in the morning. I'm up every morning at 5:30 to meditate, and if I don't, I'm real cranky. And exercise. Exercise is a real key for me with my own self-care.
Thanks, Ty, for that very personal response. From Cal, have you made a change not based on facts or data, but based on gut feel and or intuition?
I'm sorry, can you repeat? I heard the part that you cut out a little bit. The first part was, can you?
Have you made a change not based on facts or data, but based on gut feel and intuition?
Absolutely. However, I will say this, that gut feeling and intuition is because of something else that happened previously to me that I have facts and data on. And and that's the great thing about that intuition and gut response. In my experience, when I'm coaching people and doing those type of things, yes, you have to trust your gut, you have to do all those type of things. But what you get to do is realize that's based on something that you've already experienced. It may just be a small find out of that, but absolutely that gut and intuition, I have made those decisions, but realize that I've realized that it's because I've encountered something similar to this before. And more times than not, it's like, no, this is the decision I'm going to make, because you get that little feeling in there. So absolutely.
Thanks, Ty. Okay, from Bruce, is changing others' perception all about your ability to change your own mindset?
Bruce, thank you for the question. Changing others people's perceptions. Let's start there. All you can do with anybody else's perception is influence it, is share your point of view. Back to that, things you can control, you can't control other people. And it's really important to know that as long as you're telling your story and your point of view in a calm, respectful way, because when we start to shout at people or do things like, you need to be doing this, we all probably have been in that situation, and it's like, that is not the reaction you want to have, because what's the other person going to do, right? They're going to come back at times even stronger, and they start to yell and yell and yell, and then we get nowhere. So it's really about understanding what your point of view is. And again, are you listening to understand versus listening to reply? And the second part of that question, could you repeat that again, Sam? I'm sorry. I want to make sure I have it in context.
Okay, yep. So is changing others' perception all about your ability to change your own mindset?
Yes, that is the other part of it, because you have to be willing to take on their point of view. If you remember back to the story of the four blind men, they're all feeling or perceiving something different. And if they all had a talk with each other, right, it's the same creature, they're just on different parts of it. Then they'd be able to say, oh, I was actually touching this part, I was actually this. So you do have to be able to change your own point of view, or at least take things on, right? To be able to, again, get those facts, get that information, because at the end of the day, knowledge is power. Sometimes too much knowledge is off the bend, but you have to realize that 50% that I talked about, what are you bringing to the situation? So absolutely, you do have to adjust your abilities as well.
And just one final question. I'm sorry we haven't got to all of the questions. We've run out of time, but one final question from Sian, which is pertinent to the current situation, and also I think your discussion around connection. I think a lot of people in Melbourne feel like they are stuck in a goldfish bowl after such a long time in lockdown. How do you suggest we support them in moving back into connecting with others?
Reaching out. The suggestion is it's just letting people know you're there, that you got their back, that if you need something within that's in your control to help with, sometimes you won't hear from people, right? I obviously have to I'm using a situation I've had. All of you who have televisions and computers know the current climate in the United States. I'm not there for my mother. My grandparents, thankfully, are still alive, but they're in their 80s and are at the biggest threat of a lot of the things that are happening. But I still have to reach out and just say, hey, I'm here. And that's really what it is about, is knowing that someone's got your back is life-changing. And there's really no end-all be-all answer with that, Tian, because you have to put yourself in those situations, which we all have been in, and say, I can understand to an extent what you're going through. What can I do? Even if it's just, a venting session, just like hey, can we talk about something else besides COVID and all these type of things? So the big thing coming out the other end of this, especially given the situation in Melbourne, they're coming out the other side, is just letting people know and checking in. That's really what it is. Even if it's just a quick text like, hey, checking in on you, how are you? That says a lot, because that means that that person is seen and inevitably heard.
Thank you so much, Ty, for your question and answer. Some extensive questions, some personal questions, but certainly some really practical responses and practical things people can take away and implement in their own lives. So thank you so much for your time today, Ty. And thank you to, yeah. And look, if anyone would like to see more of Ty, certainly he does a lot for us around the Institute, but please email us at info@managersandleaders.com.au. You'll see Ty on a range of masterclasses and webinars that IML does, but Ty also does in-house work with a range of organisations as a consultant. So please email us at info@managersandleaders.com.au if you would like any information at all on what the Institute can bring to you.
And I'll be in the next the Q&A session. So if anyone didn't get their question answered in that, I'll be there, happy to answer.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ty. That does lead me to that next session where Ty will be, and so will Nikki, and so will some of the other facilitators for today. That'll be hosted by Shannon, which is our lunchtime or afternoon tea for New Zealand networking session in half an hour's time at 12 o'clock Australian Eastern. Where Shannon will host the session, really debrief some of the great stuff that's come out of these first two sessions, and an opportunity through Zoom to break into groups and to network and to introduce each other and have a chat about some of these sessions and some of the things that everyone's got from them, and some more questions that we can ask of Ty and Nikki and Shannon and Matt, who will also be there as a facilitator. But look, thank you so much for the session. As I said, today's Development Day, Courage Through the Crisis, is really delivering some terrific content, and I just thank the facilitators for bringing such great ideas and such a personal attitude to the session. So thank you so much. We'll see you all in 30 minutes for the lunchtime session. If you do not have a login, as I said, there's a limited requirement, but it's the first 100 that can get in. So if you would like a Zoom login for that, please email info@managersandleaders.com.au, and we can't guarantee a spot, but it's first in, best dressed for that networking session. After that session, we'll have Matt Byrne on building your team's resilience. So for all those who are not coming to the networking session, we'll see you all at the following session on building your team's resilience with Matthew Byrne, our facilitator. So thank you very much for attending. Thank you, Ty. We'll see you all in half an hour.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.